we all know Deca helps the joints. But what is the dosage for joint relief versus building muscle? If you want to know that, stay tuned. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave Olympia Week edition of Ask Dave. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Thank you so much for joining us. We are recording this, full disclosure, on Monday, October 6th. We go right into the questions. First two questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Well, one of the top competitors in the 212 class is going to be Kerrith Bajjo. Dave is coaching Kerrith Bajjo. So somebody wants to know from your app some of the training secrets and what kind of a diet do you have Kerrith on? Keto, non-keto, or rotational?
Yeah, I would say we're rotational, but the last couple weeks I've been giving him a lot of like protein fat days, So he's not really technically on a ketogenic diet, because the ketogenic diet would be every day you'd be doing protein fat. So, but I'm giving him some low days. But my low days, which are no carbs, can contain a significant amount of fat. So when we say my keto diet, yes, he's doing my keto diet like every couple days. He depletes down, and then I might give him a burger and fries, or I might give him a carb day. And so we're playing around with that. And his physique is such that he can drop weight and gain weight really quickly. So as soon as I see that he's too flat, I feed him. If I think he's too full, then I'll cut him back. And we've been doing that back and forth. And there's a lot of like daily updates with Kerrith, because his body changes so quickly. He is a genetic freak. You can literally give this guy no carbs and he does not look flat. But sometimes your skin gets loose, and that's when that's when I know he's glycogen depleted. So obviously now we're at, I guess, Monday here. So we still got a number of days. He's at the weight. The great thing about Kerrith is he doesn't have any problem making weight. So that's a good thing, because we don't have to over deplete him. Once you over deplete someone, it's really hard to fill them up again. So he's got that little bit of an advantage that I can just feed him whatever I want. And he's well under the weight, and he's gonna make it no problem, which makes him very dangerous on that stage. A lot of these guys have to suck down and make weight. Keon Pearson, another person well under the weight, obviously has a much easier time also coming in at his best, because he doesn't have to deplete down. Clarita, same thing. So the top 3-4 guys are going to be in that category of not having to worry about making weight. They're not going to have to deplete. They're not going to have to do diuretics to make weight. And that's why I think the 212 guys have looked so good the last several years, because no one is really struggling to make that weight class. But once again, it's day to day. If I see something that I don't like, I make changes. If I see everything's going well, we don't do too many changes. I've upped his cardio a lot more than it was earlier on, but that's because what happens is as you get leaner and leaner, your body gets resistant to losing the weight. It doesn't want to get rid of that little last bit of fat, and you got to kind of sometimes torture it off. But we haven't gone over an hour of cardio. Matter of fact, we're well under it, but we've come close to it a couple of days. I've been pushing him a little harder this past week. Once again, when we get down to about Wednesday or Tuesday, probably, I'm gonna, he's not gonna go to the gym anymore. We're just gonna do posing, and I'm gonna fill him up. So we're almost there. He's got 2 more days of torture, and that's it.
Second question, again, these first two from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Deca, you teased the episode with this. Your Deca dosage for joint pain, and I guess what is the fine line between that and then for muscle building?
Yeah, you could take 100 milligrams of Deca a week and get the anti-inflammatory effect that you're looking for, which is really nice. It's a nice effect, because especially if you're on TRT and you really don't want to do cycles of drugs anymore, and you have sore joints, you can take 100 milligrams a week, and you're going to get the benefits without having any of the negative side effects of Guys who have high prolactin from DECA issues, which is an erection issue, can result from that. People who, just like I said, don't want their blood pressure raising too high. They don't want to put on too much weight because they're just looking to maintain health. It makes DECA a really appealing option. If, however, you want to build muscle on DECA, you need at least a minimum of 200 to 400 milligrams a week, combined with something else, obviously. Ideally, I always found 400 to 600 milligrams built muscle. Ideally, some people do have problems with prolactin, like I said, because DECA can raise prolactin levels, and in people who are sensitive, they could have erection issues with it. Luckily, knock on wood for me, I never had an issue with that, but I never really used over 400 or 500 milligrams a week of it. Some people can look at a bottle of DECA and have prolactin issues. In that case, you could take a drug called cabergoline, also known as Dostinex. It does inhibit prolactin in the body, and it seems to help people who have the issues with the DECA. Some people it doesn't help, some people it does. I've never used it because I never really needed it. I don't think you should just knee-jerk use cabergoline if you don't really need it and you don't have any negative side effects from DECA. I always felt that sometimes the DECA issue was a dose-related thing, because some people get it with trenbolone too, and trenbolone doesn't really raise prolactin that much unless you go really, really high dose with it. DECA, you can get it at a lower dose if you're prone to it. Now, these two questions were both from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. It's $29 a month. You download it, iTunes Store, Android Store. You get me as your coach in your back pocket. You get access to all my writings, all my videos I've done in an organized fashion. I answer everyone's questions in an open forum, so you get to see everyone's questions and answers. It's a real good learning experience. I do a Q&A video. It's like an extra Ask Dave episode every single week for the app members. It's a real good learning experience. All my cycles are in there, beginner, advanced, men, women. It's all in there. My diets, my keto diet, rotational diet, all my workouts are in there. You get access to pretty much everything I've done over the last 25 years of my career in one place, and it's constantly evolving because I'm constantly putting up new material. So check it out. Like I said, it's a great value. Some people have my coaching and they have that. If you can't afford the coaching, for $29 a month, everyone can afford that. And it's a great learning experience, and I want to thank you guys for supporting it. Can't hear you, Sid.
As we now go to our YouTube community page, we've really made a concerted effort to grow that side of the YouTube channel as far as our community pages, as well as our short form content on there as well. You've previously recommended a doctor for gyno and surgery in the past, Dr. Blau. Do you recommend any doctors in the New York area for a torn bicep, or for that matter, any other major torn muscles?
I used a Dr. Scaglione who did my quad repair, and I think he also does shoulders. All those guys in the Northwell area are really good. Northwell, which used to be, I guess, Long Island Jewish Hospital in Manhasset, Long Island. But, if you want the best of the best, special surgery in Manhattan is probably the way to go. And there are guys on Long Island and Westchester that operate at special surgery in Manhattan, but they have offices on Long Island and Westchester. So, you might want to go get those guys. Those guys are really the best of the best. I remember, I think Victor Prisk, when he was doing his residency in hand specialty and ankle specialty, was in special surgery there, or in Mount Sinai, one of those guys. The best surgeons in the country seem to be in the New York area, for orthopedics. So you might want to check them out. And update on Dr. Blau. Dr. Blau is supposed to retire, believe it or not, at the end of the year. But he's working, and he's been training this plastic surgeon. She's a board certified plastic surgeon, Dr. Liz, and I'm going to be doing some educational videos with her because she's going to be taking over his practice at some point in the future. Right now, I know a lot of guys are getting in there. They want Dr. Blau to knock him out before he retires. I don't think he's going away so quickly, but I know Dr. Liz is going to be doing surgeries, and she's been doing surgeries with him now, and she's really good. I went to her and I sat and we talked, and she's got some good visions, and she's got some new cool machines coming in there to do resurfacing of skin and laser stuff and liposuction. So I'm going to be doing a lot of educational stuff with Liz in terms of the plastic surgery options that are available there. So this is something exciting coming up in the future. I'll let you guys know about that. But as far as orthopedic surgery goes, once again, Northwell, which used to be Long Island Jewish, and special surgery in Manhattan. Way to go.
A question that's really up your alley, cacao. Do you think single ingredient, 100% cacao dark chocolate might be an underrated healthy fat for bodybuilders considering the stearic acid, antioxidants, and minerals it provides, as well as being one of the best natural sources of copper, which is essential for connective tissue health?
Yeah. I used to sell those raw cacao bars. They were, it's really a shame that I can't make these anymore. They were 100% raw cacao with cacao butter in it, and they were organic. They were sweetened with stevia only, so they had no artificial sweeteners for the people who don't like artificial sweeteners. And they actually tasted really good. It took a long time to tweak these things to taste as good as it did. I used to sell a ton of these bars. But here's the problem. When you don't put sugar in a bar, okay, because these had no sugar, no dairy in them. When you don't put sugar in a bar, they melt easily, okay? So, because I live in Florida here and it's warm, and even in the summer it's warm, I have to keep them in the freezer or the refrigerator at the very least. I had to buy so many of these bars from this guy who was making them for me. He wanted me to buy, first it started out as 1,000, which was fine. Then it went to 2,000. I had 3 refrigerator and freezers all over the place in my houses, just with bars in them. And then he wanted me to go to 5,000 bars at a time. I'm like, I don't know where to put them all. I said, I don't have enough freezers and refrigerators for these things. So I stopped doing it because he started getting ridiculous. And the prices were not cheap. But I knew people were paying for it. Didn't matter. People loved the bars that much. And you only needed 1 or 2 squares a day. It wasn't like you were eating a whole bar. And it was great. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in cacao. It's a great antioxidant, polyphenolic. It's actually a source of saturated fat, but it's a good source of saturated fat that we can use in our diet. And I think it's, like you said, there's a lot of interesting minerals and stuff like that in there. It's good for heart health. It's good for blood pressure control. And, there's really no negatives to it. And I really miss it. And sometimes I'll buy some 100% cacao from like Amazon, or if I see it in the supermarket. The problem is it tastes terrible. Oh, it needs to be sweetened with something. If you get the unsweetened one, it's almost impalatable. There are some that have a little bit of sugar in it, and sometimes I'll buy it with minuscule amounts of sugar just to be able to get it down. But the ones that taste respectable have a lot of sugar in them. So it's like a trade-off. I haven't seen any people really making raw cacao with like a stevia-based flavoring system, or even I don't care. I'd even use sucralose. It's fine, but I don't see them doing it. Because maybe there's just not enough people buying it. Once again, I really wish I could make those bars again. Maybe I'll reach out to the guy and see if he'll do a limited run for me, because they were very popular and we sold a lot on DavePalumbo.com.
Second question about Deca. Earlier was about dosages for recovery versus muscle building. Well, this is about negative press that Deca seems to be getting with today's bodybuilding community. Do you still have your athletes using Deca in their cycles?
I do. I like it off season, especially when you start getting real big and you're pushing heavy weights, because it's really good for the joints. And it happens to be a really good anabolic. Stacked with test, it builds muscle. Deca and EQ are my 2 favorites, probably off season for building muscle. I mean, Tren is great, obviously, but people get crazy on the Tren. So as far as stacking with test, the least toxic, most anabolic I find that allow you to continue eating and opens up your appetite is Deca with test and EQ with test. There's nothing better than that. And because they're so long acting, okay, especially if you use like a test cypionate and an anthate with it, a long acting ester, there's almost zero toxicity. Okay, the only thing you got to watch out for is your blood pressure. You don't want your blood pressure to go too high, and if red blood cell count can get very high on all anabolics, you want to make sure they're not getting through the roof either. You might have to go donate some blood, but there's no liver toxicity. No steroids are kidney toxic. High blood pressure is bad for your kidneys, but so really those 2 are absolutely ideal, and I love Deca. And I usually when I start guys off on contest prep, I usually start them on just 200 milligrams of Deca a week, along with like maybe EQ and test just to start them out, because usually when you first start dieting, you drop all that water weight because your glycogen levels are lower because you're lowering carb intake. That's when people's joints start hurting them. So I'll put a little bit of Deca in kind of to soothe the joints. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of Deca. Obviously, if an athlete I'm working with has problems with erection issues because of high prolactin levels and they just hate taking Deca, I'm not going to ruin their life with it. I'm like, we'll use something else. But for most people, it's a great way to, it's a great drug.
Question about length of prep. What is the longest you will have one of your men's bodybuilding athletes in prep for a show? If they have to do a long prep, say 20 or more weeks, how do you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys need a long time, because some people get really fat in the off season, or some people maybe haven't dieted in a few years and they just came back and they just need extra time. I've worked with guys for 24 weeks, on a contest prep. I mean, if we need it, we need it. Look, I've started with guys. We started 16 weeks out, 18 weeks out, like I normally do, and we get to about 4 to 6 weeks out, and I'm like, we're not going to make it, and we push the show back another 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and so sometimes the contest prep can go, almost 30 weeks. Listen, I've dieted for a show when I was going to do the Metropolitan Championships in '94, I believe it was. It was '94. The show got pushed back because it used to be in February in New York, and then they pushed it back to like April or something like that. And I had to diet an extra 8 weeks, beyond what I normally would diet. And me, I mean, at that point in time, I did have some body fat, but I certainly didn't have a lot of body fat, so it became a really long diet. But you know what? I looked my best. I think I actually grew into that show because I was able to have cheat meals and buffer it a little bit, and I would carb up and then I would deplete again, and I kind of prolonged the diet, but for some reason it seemed to work really well for me. So I don't mind doing long diets with people as long as you pace the person. You don't want to peak them and then have them try to hold that peak for 8 weeks. That never works out.
Question about the pump. I remember a long time ago we answered this question, sort of the scientific benefits of the pump. Where do you stand on the pump as an indication of muscle growth? Is it an indicator, or is it something more a placebo effect?
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone. Pumps don't build muscle, okay? Fatigued feeling, dull ache, that's usually an indication that you've damaged muscle fibers. And that's what, right? Why would your body want to build a bigger muscle? Because you're challenging that muscle, okay, and making it lift weights that it really can't handle. You're lowering the weight under control. You're getting micro tears in the muscle. The muscle is saying, you know what, we're not big enough. We got to get bigger. That's what builds muscle. Pumping tons of blood into a muscle, okay, doing multiple reps with lighter weight, doesn't make the muscle believe that it needs to be any bigger. It might need to be more aerobically enhanced, meaning that you might get more mitochondrial production or the upregulation of certain metabolic enzymes that help mobilize fatty acids, okay, but you're increasing endurance. You're not increasing muscle size. So if you really want to make the muscle get bigger at maximum efficiency, you want to lift heavy weights that challenge the body to just barely get through the workout. Okay, so less reps, okay, higher weight under good form and good control is what elicits the best muscle results. And look at the guys that are the biggest. Look at the Nick Walkers and the Andrew Jacks. When they build muscle, they're lifting heavy weights. And that's what, look at Ronnie Coleman. Look at Jay Cutler. Jay said he did high reps, but he did heavy weights too. It might not have been heavy for him as much as, because of the size of him, but compared to the average person, they were heavy weights. Jay lifted heavy. Everyone lifted heavy to put muscle on. That's just the way it goes. Once you get the muscle, sometimes it's easier to maintain it. You don't have to go quite as heavy, but to get that muscle to begin with, most people have to lift heavy weights.
I haven't cycled test and EQ since 2016 when I tore my pec. Pec has been repaired, and I'm looking to get back on cycle after 9 years. Your thoughts on running 300 mg a week of tests to ease my way into it? Will I see results with this starting cycle?
If you're going to do a cycle, you're better off using 2 drugs, because we know that when we stack 2 drugs together, it elicits a much better muscle building effect. Okay, so it doesn't. In other words, you're better off doing 200 milligrams of test a week and 200 milligrams of Deca a week than doing 300 milligrams or 400 milligrams of test alone a week. You just get a better effect. So if you're going to cycle and you want to cycle low dose drugs, that's fine, but combine 2 drugs together and you're going to get a better result.
That's cool. All right. Insulin. Can I take it without GH?
Whenever people say I want to take insulin, I'm always like, well, what are you taking it for? Are your fasting blood sugars high? Well, I don't know. I just heard that insulin builds muscle. Well, insulin doesn't build muscle if you don't need it, right? So what I recommend you do is test your fasting blood sugars every morning. If they're running over 90, okay, and they're in the high 90s, maybe even into the 100s, you probably need a long-acting insulin. If your blood sugars are good and they're not over 90 every morning, okay, that means your fastings are under control and you're looking to add a little bit of muscle, okay, because maybe you feel like maybe you're eating a lot of food, maybe you don't absorb some of these big meals that have a lot of carbs in them. You can use a fast-acting insulin like a Novolin R or a Novolog, which is super fast-acting, but now you're going to have to count carbs, and so can you use it without insulin? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to build any more muscle. Usually what I found was I needed insulin when I would take GH because GH made me insulin resistant, meaning I wasn't absorbing my food properly. I was probably running high blood sugars, whether they were fasting or post-meal, I don't know. But I'm sure with the amount of carbs I was eating, my blood sugars were probably too high, and my pancreas couldn't keep up with absorbing all those carbs. So in that case, when I started taking a fast-acting insulin, okay, I started to grow better. But not many people are eating exorbitant amounts of carbs like I was because of my metabolism being that fast. So to just knee-jerk take insulin is not the right way to do it. It's to test your blood sugars first thing in the morning, fasting, and then 2 hours post-meal. If the 2-hour post-meals are over 130, then you probably need a fast-acting too. But most people who don't have enough insulin, it's the fasting blood sugars that are not doing it right, in which case you want to provide your body with a long-acting insulin like Lantus or Tresiba or Toujeo or Novolin N. Those are the right way to handle it. And the great thing about a long-acting insulin is you don't have to worry about what you're eating. It works in the background. Whereas when you're taking a fast-acting insulin, you need to calculate how many grams of carbs you're eating or you could go low.
Before I take this last question, somebody did ask, aside from Urs, who else do you see from the classic physique division following him into the open class? And I guess my answer to that would be, for one, Wesley Visser's already said he's going to compete in an open show. That's to be determined. But I think what we'll have a better idea is after we see the lineup this weekend at the Olympia. I think that's a great conversation to have post Olympia, because then you'll have a really, an idea of, all right, who's ready to take that leap into the open class, and I guess who needs some time off before he does that. But we'll close out with a story, or a question rather, and I'll say story because this question made me think about an idea for a show the day that I ran past you earlier this week, and that is maybe you should have some sort of like I know Dennis James has his old school roundtable, but I think they discuss, show topics that are very current, they react to news, they have current competitors. I was thinking, and this is sort of how old, after hours sort of, started off, where you'd have real old school stories, right? You talk, have an entire episode is dedicated to goals and advantage. Anyway, that for another time. But the question was right down that track, and that is about Mike Matarazzo. Great guy, great physique. You think he had the best calves ever? Also, what happened during his career? 91, he looked amazing. Then he seemed to be a bit up and down in terms of placings for the rest of his career. You think the scare he got at the 93 Arnold had an effect on his future preps for shows?
No, I think Matarazzo had the craziest calves and arms I'd ever seen. They were just wacky. I wouldn't say they were the best. They were just like genetic. You knew they were genetic. I mean, yeah, they grew from him training them and from him, obviously taking drugs too. But I think they were just something that ran in his family. His father had those calves, and he was a freak in terms of arms and calves. And look, arms and calves are very impressive on stage. The problem is his calves were so big that it made his quads look they didn't look as impressive. So he had good front quads, but he didn't have, his adductors weren't that great, and his hamstrings were okay, but he got shredded. Mike was a freaking maniac with dieting hard and making sure he looked his best. His back could have been a little bit better, you know, a little wider, more developed. But like I said, he would come in so shredded that he would always qualify for the Olympia every year, you know. And he was a fan favorite, and he had a lot of size. I mean, size counts for something, you know. Yeah, his back could have been a little bigger. Maybe his adductors on his, you know, legs could have been a little bit bigger, but he had everything else. And when you have conditioning and you have shape and you had a small waist and he had, once again, those impressive arms and calves, he was a fan favorite, you know. So, you know, I think he would have done really well in this day and age of bodybuilding, because when he was competing, there was such genetic freaks back then. He probably would have won more shows had he not run up against the Flex Wheelers and Ronnies and all those Dorians and all those guys, you know, that he had to go against Cormier and Nasser. You know, nowadays, I'm not saying he would be Mr. Olympia, but he would certainly be in the top 5 at the Olympia. There's no doubt about that. You know, he's a modern day Nick Walker with better shape. Nick probably has a better back than Mike does, but Mike has certainly, you know, comparable arms, better calves, you know, and you know, his conditioning was always stellar. So it would have been interesting to see how he would have done in this modern age. I think he would have been super popular, and so he would have probably had millions of followers on Instagram, because he was a really popular guy back in the day. He probably was one of the most popular guest posers. I would say he probably guest posed at more shows than anyone else. You know, I guest posed with him a few times, and you know, he was just we had a friendship, and he was just this rock solid guy. I mean, when we lost him, we really lost a really, really good guy. It's a shame, because you know, he was one of the good guys in the sport. Put it that way.